Man, what a fortuitous day that you and I are chatting today. I woke up to the top of my news feed was Zuckerberg announcing a change to Meta and Instagram and that whole ecosystem when it came to, I don't want to get this wrong. Are you familiar with what they came out with today? What were the terms? Was it censorship? Was it
Oh,
community?
it was a bunch. So basically, I mean, this has been a pretty momentous week. It's been a long time coming. I've been monitoring these developments for a long time at Facebook. But they're finally implementing what I think were wish list items. So on the one hand, you had Nick Clegg, who was the head of global policy for Facebook. This is a guy who was the former deputy UK prime minister. He wrote a book called How to Stop Brexit after Brexit had already been passed. Basically told everyone to join Keir Starmer's Labour Party. That's the party that's currently in power in the UK that is arresting thousands and thousands of people for totally innocuous memes online. They've even now criminalized effectively the retweet button. Um, and Nick Clegg, who's been hand in glove with that whole operation, has been running global speech policies at Facebook until just 2 days ago when he announced his resignation. You had Dana White, who was added to the board of directors at Meta just yesterday. And then today you had a whole slew of policy changes announced. One that they were getting rid of the internal fact checker program at Facebook, which goes far beyond simple fact checking. It's
Mhm.
it's an algorithmic demotion process where anything Facebook decides is misinformation gets automatically throttled, deboosted, shadow banned. They're moving towards a community note system, just like X has. They've announced that they are eliminating the restrictions on content around things like gender and gender identity and immigration. And they've also announced that they are getting rid of their previous algorithmic throttling of so-called political content, which many thought was basically just a proxy for being able to not talk about conservative ideas on Facebook. So all of that has been announced today on the heels of these structural changes that have been happening all week.
So that, of course, begs a follow-on question, and I'm curious your thoughts here. Are they doing this because they've wanted to do it for a while and they now see the opportunity to do so? Or are they doing this because they realize they are not going to survive the ecosystem that may exist post January 20th? Are they just trying to get in front and ride the wave? Or have they always wanted to do this but felt unable to do so?
Think it's a combination of both. I think almost more than any other platform, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, their whole, empire, WhatsApp, um, Threads, they've got, there's multiple platforms that are all simultaneously being affected by these changes under Zuck's control there. Um, I think it's a combination of two things. On the one hand, I think Zuck always felt a sense of very deep whiplash when the 2016 election came around. And suddenly, yeah, Zuckerberg has always been a pretty libertarian guy. If you read a book like Chaos Monkeys or anything about sort of the inside history of Facebook, and he's always, I think, had a kind of ideological predilection, not too dissimilar from Elon Musk, actually. But he has never been willing to put as much risk on the line. I give the example a lot of times that in 2019, Zuckerberg was making speeches in San Jose that censorship had gone too far on Facebook. He said that in 2019,
Wow.
before Facebook would triple down on censorship. But that was at the time when hate speech and other sort of pressures from Europe and from the inside here in the U.S. were cramming down on Facebook. He was already uncomfortable with that. He announced that he wanted to try to stop a lot of the censorship uh, changes that were being made at Facebook. But then shortly after that, he was hit with a $60 billion ad boycott, an ad boycott called hashtag change the terms, meaning change the terms of service, cost Facebook $60 billion in market cap in just a few weeks. And so Facebook folded like a lawn chair and gave up all the control, outsourced outsource things to third-party moderators, outsource them to the blob, outsource them to these government and intelligence intermediaries, basically delegated this that whole everything to do with speech to government affairs people, to the trust and safety team, to the global policy folks, and then even that was not enough. Doing everything, I think Zuck felt that he was under an existential crisis from the pressure coming from the 2016 election with Russiagate and the allegations of Russian interference on Facebook, which basically led to a massive CIA infiltration of the platform. Half of the trust and safety team ultimately became former intelligence agents. You had the advertising pressures that were put on Facebook to cripple the company if they didn't go through with these censorship policies. Facebook folded and did everything DHS asked in the run-up to the 2020 election, censoring pro-Trump voices. Zuckerberg himself even opened up a $400 million effective in-kind contribution to the Biden campaign in order to help Biden's victory. I mean, that's more than even Elon Musk gave to Trump this election cycle. And at the end of it, the Biden White House was actually not good to them. I mean, this is one of the great ironies, as sadistic as the Biden White House was to its enemies, it was not even good to its friends. The fact is the Biden State Department did nothing to protect Mark Zuckerberg against foreign governments cracking down on Facebook, like the EU Digital Services Act, which just a few months ago took major enforcement actions against all of Meta. Against this came from Brazil, from Canada, from Australia. Typically, you would think in a typical crony capitalism situation, when a big, Meta is a top 5, top 7 company by market cap at this point. They're one of the top 10 largest companies in the world. They did huge favors for the Biden campaign, and the Biden administration just continued to milk them dry. I mean, crony capitalism 101 is, you reward your cronies.
Yeah. Little quid pro quo.
Right. But it was all quid, no quo. And so in the face of that, you had the growing irritations by Zuckerberg that even if they completely, supined themselves, laid prostrate, they still would not be protected. They watched as Google has been gored by the Justice Department. The Biden administration has been proceeding with this, Microsoft-style, Standard Oil-style attempt to break up of Google. They are threatening that of Facebook. So I think Zuckerberg felt like he didn't want to do this in the first place. He only did it because of commercial pressure. All of the bending over backwards did not relinquish the pressure one iota. So he'd rather have the kind of symmetry that comes from, now it's easy to do the right thing because now the regulators are going to be run by the Trump administration. So I think he wanted to do that in the first place, but was too much of, frankly, did not want to take the risk that Elon did. Now that it's sort of secure to do that, I think he's going with what he wanted to do anyway, and now it's sort of working out perfectly for him in that he gets to, cozy up to the administration and feel like that's also in the business interests of Facebook.
On those, I exist on both of those platforms, staying in the Meta ecosystem. Facebook, not as much. I don't use as much Instagram. Man, I would love to say it was just looking at pictures, but it is a whole social ecosystem in and of itself. Probably the worst platform ever to have arguments on, but that's what people seem to use it for.
Yeah.
And you hear all the time on both of those platforms, you hear about censorship, you hear about the algorithm, you hear about shadow banning. And I think at this point, especially with an announcement today from Zuckerberg, there is no question that it was happening. But these entities, they never talk about the mechanism of what exactly they're doing. Who is this impacting? People can talk about, they'll go to their back end and say, well, my metrics are down and this, that, or the other. And quite frankly, sometimes people just post boring shit, right? So you see people all the time, I'm being shadow banned. It's like, actually know that the 400th picture of your cat in a row is just not trending the way that it used to. Nothing against cat. I happen to be more of a dog person, but they never actually pull back the curtain to show the mechanism of what they're doing. And I'm curious as to why you think that is. I mean, my assumption would be is they just don't want people to know because of how expansive and powerful it actually is.
Right. I think from their perspective, they talked about this a lot from 2017 to 2019 when they were setting up this architecture about how transparent to be from the platform side to users, especially when it comes to so-called borderline content, content that does not violate the terms of service, but that Facebook, for political or commercial reasons, does not want to dominate the platform. So Facebook has a borderline content policy. YouTube has one. Twitter had one for a while. And I think part of not saying what kind of content gets throttled with specificity is designed to prevent what they call brinksmanship, which is when you know what the algorithm says you can't do without getting punished, then it incentivizes people who want to publish that kind of content to go right up to the line and basically get 99% of the way there, but not trip the deboost, not trip the words or phrases or constellation of terms or images that have been hashed in databases to to create that throttling so that that content effectively dominates because it's just shy of it. So, for example, if they were to break out the exact list of keywords, so for example, negative efficacy was one of these terms during the COVID era, where if you suggested that the vaccines had negative efficacy, or if or stop the steal, for example, was a
Yeah.
censored phrase during the 2020 election. There's millions of these. There's entire careers that people get paid six-figure salaries to constantly update these code books of throttled terms, words, phrases, tweaking the sentiment analysis to determine whether or not you support the thing that you are mentioning or not. This is all this whole sort of computational field of natural language processing that the AI goes into rigging the AI. But I think from their perspective, if they were to disclose that with full transparency, instead of saying stop the steal, you would say, STAHP, the steal. You
Game
would,
the system.
yes, exactly. Or you would, and also these things move fast. As in addition to the code bases and lexicon that's maintained at a static chronic level, there's also Facebook has what are called rapid response units, which is that when there are trending news narratives, there are whole teams at Facebook that curate the evolution of that news coverage in order to make sure it goes a certain way. So, for
Hmm.
example, when the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin, immediately Facebook, the rapid response units took to the news cycle in order to prevent any sort of amplification of pro Kyle Rittenhouse sides of the story, downranking and throttling news organizations that provided favorable coverage, applying deboost to accounts that amplified it, shadow banning or throttling anything that mentioned the terms or phrases. And so you see a lot of that as well. And so sometimes they can't even really provide a kind of transparency because it's not feasible because of how fast moving these
Hmm.
things are.
I guess that makes sense. That makes sense.
Also, remember they're a global company. So these
True.
things happen everywhere. A scandal breaks out in India, a scandal breaks out in Ukraine, a scandal breaks out in Brazil. There's pressure at the regional level in order to not allow the proliferation of rumors because the regulatory agency there wants to talk to a Facebook liaison to throttle discussion in that country. And so it's hard to get that kind of transparency to the users.